Yeah, thank you, Andreas. Hi, everyone. And I have to admit, I'm very impressed. You were all on time. I was watching through the camera. So, yeah, we're off to a good start. So as Andreas said, my name is Matthew Griffin. I'm the CEO and founder of the 311 Institute, a deep futures and futures think tank. Now, I split the future into two. So I talk about the future, which I regard as the next 20 years, because most multinational organizations typically care about the next 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 10, 20 years, depending on the horizon plans that you create. But I also look at deeper futures, which are up to 50 years out, because if you're a government, typically you care about those as well. Longer term investors care about those as well. So I cross over 450 technologies, I cross every sector, and I regularly travel around the world, basically, so I'm quite the information sponge. I also run the World Futures Forum, so we work with the United Nations to try to solve the world's greatest challenges like poverty, hunger, etc., etc. And I also run Exponential University, where I teach the future, at the moment, to 10-year-olds. That's it. And I'm glad to say that it's their favourite course. So what we're going to be doing through this session, as Andrea said, is it's really divided into three parts. So the first part of the session, we're going to be looking at the big mega trends and macro trends that are affecting you directly or indirectly, and we can have conversations about those. Then we're going to have a look at business models and the future of work, and we're going to look at some of the future business models that you might be able to adapt, as well as some of the future working practices that it's good to get a point of view on that you could also embrace. And then thirdly, and obviously not last or least, we're going to be having a look at the future of dentistry, where we're going to be having a look at some of the latest and greatest dental breakthroughs. So it's a feature-packed presentation. So kicking it off, I'm only really going to be talking, even though I'm talking about a lot, I'm only going to be talking about the tip of the iceberg. So if you want to know more about the latest trends and technologies that are actually already here and or emerging, then just scan this QR code and you can download these free codexes. And we have over 200 megatrends explained in exquisite detail in the Trends Codex. And when we have a look at the Technology Codex, there's now 300 exponential technologies listed in there. What they are, and why you should kind of care about them, depending on the industry that you're actually in. So, with no further ado, I'm going to go and have a look at the megatrends. Now, when we have a look at technology and trends, it's no secret that both of these together influence decision and strategy making, basically within organizations. They also change everything about the world as we know it. Now, today we're actually going through a whole variety of what I call system level shifts, and we'll dig into these in a moment. But when we have a look at the economic trends, there are more economic trends than ever before. Quite a lot of them, like decentralized finance and crypto, if you step back 10 or 20 years ago, would have been considered science fiction. We have significant environmental trends, basically, that you're obviously all aware of. We have political trends, which are influencing things like your supply chains, where you grow your businesses, how you grow your businesses, regulation and policy making, as well as lots of other different things. We have societal trends, where we talk about consumer behaviors, as well as a lot of other things. And then we have technological trends as well. And when you sort of bring all of these things together, bearing in mind that there's a huge amount going on, things can get really complicated, really fast. And when it comes to trying to figure out the best strategy for your company, sometimes looking at all of these things can overwhelm you. So I'm going to try to bring all of this back down to basics and simplify it. Although, even though I simplify it, it's still complex. Now, when we have a look at the economic trends, firstly, we have Asia on the rise. When we have a look at a lot of the emerging markets, they're all in Asia, whether it's India, obviously China, but also the rest of Asia as well. Now, when we have a look at the growing middle class, by 2030, it's estimated that there will be 600 million more middle class people, again, predominantly in Asia. And from your perspective, these are future customers. They have an increasing amount of disposable income, and they want better things, better services, better healthcare, better dental care, and so on and so forth. So that's 600 million more people are going to be joining the middle class in the next 8 years. We see the growth of protectionism. Now, increasingly, we've always talked about this phenomenon of globalization. And while we are still globalizing, as we start entering into a couple of different eras, which I'll come into at the moment, we're actually seeing the dramatic rise of protectionism. Now, this is where individual sovereign nations or groups of sovereign nations come together to protect themselves from perhaps a security perspective, an energy perspective, a food perspective, a societal perspective against the others. So protectionism in itself actually affects, again, where you place your businesses, how you grow your businesses, how you are allowed to grow your businesses, as well as supply chains, your innovation and R&D efforts, and so on and so forth. We're also seeing the rise of what we call strategic dislocation. So strategic dislocation is where different multinational organizations, typically that operate globally, again with complex customer bases and complex supply chains, are now making the conscious decision to move out of particular countries. So we've seen this with Russia, with the Ukraine war. We saw this during the trade wars, especially with China and the United States. So we saw quite a lot of organizations strategically dislocating themselves from the Chinese supply chains and manufacturing centers, as well as other things. We're also seeing the massive rise of urbanization. Now, in 2030, the United Nations estimates that 65% of the world's population will be in cities. However, when we have a look at some of the technology trends, increasingly different technologies are letting us decentralize and democratize access to all kinds of services, which means that we no longer have to be in cities. So, for example, if we have a look at online banking, you used to have to go into a city, generally, to visit a bank branch. Now you do that on your phone. Education, some of the best education was in the cities. Now we have decentralized and distributed education systems thanks to EdTech. When we have a look at healthcare, a lot of rural locations don't really have fantastic healthcare facilities, whether that's dental or whether it's GP or hospital services, so primary or secondary healthcare services. But increasingly, technologies, and I'll show you some of them, are helping us decentralize primary and secondary healthcare in new ways. So when we look at working, when we look at the future of work, increasingly we can work from anywhere. So personally, when we talk about increasing urbanization, technology will actually let more people move out of the cities, where the quality of life is better. Even when we have a look at the future of transportation, fully autonomous transportation will make commutes simpler, faster, and so on and so forth. So urbanization could actually be a trend that starts gently reversing, even though it will still travel in the main direction of an increase. When we have a look at environmental, we have climate change. Now, over the past 20 years, we've seen a 2,000% increase in the number of extreme weather events. When we have a look at extreme weather itself, for example, we've now seen over $3 trillion worth of damage in terms of insurance payouts from companies like Aon and so on and so forth. In addition to that, we now experience around 200 extreme weather events every year. These again affect supply chains. In addition to that, we're seeing massive droughts, we're seeing massive floods, and we're seeing massive fires, which again affect things like business continuity. We've had 1.2 million people killed by extreme weather. We've also had 4.2 billion people affected by extreme weather. So if we have a look at climate change and extreme weather, for example, over the next 20 years, a lot of European cities as well as global cities are going to be subject to extreme heat stress. In fact, now more people are dying in cities because of heat than of almost any other leading cause. And that's only going to get worse. We're already in the middle of a heat wave. I've been traveling globally, and every single country that I've been to in the past 2 months, the first thing that people have said to me is, this is the hottest it has ever been. Whether it's Switzerland, whether it's Helsinki, let alone Dubai in the Middle East, etc., etc. So extreme weather is having a huge impact, basically both on society, but also business, but also on the environment and other things that we care about. Resource scarcity, as we have a growing population, we are now consuming enough resources for 1.7 Earths, which is unsustainable. To put this into context, every year we gather together over 100 billion tons of resources from Mother Earth in wood, mining, all that sort of stuff. However, only 8.6% of that is recycled globally, which means that out of that 100 billion tons worth of resources that we get from the Earth, only roughly 8.6% have any chance of being used again, let alone in a circular economy fashion. We have sea level rise, so sea levels are rising at a rate of between 5 millimeters and 8 millimeters. The impact of this is that by 2040-ish, 2050, we could actually see 54 of the world's biggest megacities underwater. So we're already seeing how a third of Shanghai and Shenzhen will be underwater. Louisiana will mostly be underwater. Miami is generally regarded as ground zero for sea level rise, and they've seen an increase in flooding of 352% in the past 10 years. So when we have a look at sea level rise, if we have more megacities going underwater, and we have more people moving to those cities that are going underwater, does that start reversing the urbanization trend? Highly likely. We then have water wars. So today, 70% of all of the fresh water that we have access to is used by agriculture for livestock and crops. 30% is used by humanity. As we have more people, by 2030 we should have another 1.2 billion people on the planet. We're going to need more livestock, we're going to need more crops to feed those livestock, and we're going to need more water, which means that by 2030, according to the United Nations, 129 countries will suffer extreme water stress, where that's enough for them to have problems growing crops, and we will have water wars. In addition to that, when we have a look at states like California, for example, we are now seeing the hydroelectric dams so low that Lake Mead and the Hoover Dam are at risk of stopping generating hydroelectric power. So we have multiple problems there. However, we do have solutions to a lot of these things. For example, so climate change, we have the technology to eliminate 80% of all greenhouse gas emissions today. When we have a look at agriculture, we have new agricultural methodologies such as vertical farms, such as cultivated meat, which all of a sudden means that we can not only feed more people more stuff, but we can actually reduce the environmental damage and environmental consequences. So while I'm talking about these mega trends, many of which are global challenges, global problems, we do have solutions. And some of that is a conversation for another time. When we look at sustainability, ESG, increasingly more and more organizations are talking about developing circular economy products. So BMW, for example, has developed the iCircular, which is a car that they want to produce in 2030 that is fully recyclable and reusable. So this car is actually glued together. It uses new materials. So when we look at the circular economy, this is where you should consider the design, the way you design products, the waste that you produce during the design process, the manufacturing process, and the disposal process should be considered as waste. So we're trying to design waste out of the products that we design. When we have a look at things like climate change, again, we sort of discussed that, but that is changing business at a global level. It's also changing how investors invest in your companies. So for example, over a third of all assets under management by the global asset management companies like Legal & General, Citigroup, BlackRock, and so on and so forth are now ESG stocks and ESG portfolios. We see companies coming up increasingly with net zero pledges. So when we talk about net zero pledges, there's a couple of things here. So we have companies talking about net zero by 2050. We also have companies like Microsoft talking about net negative carbon emissions by 2050. We also have other organizations as well as countries like Bhutan that talk about zero waste initiatives as well. So when you're actually looking at your own business, should you be aiming for net zero or should you be aiming for zero waste and net negative? Bearing in mind that while everyone talks about sustainability, if we have sustainable businesses today, we stop the damage that we are doing to the environment. So should we actually be talking about sustainability, or should we be talking about regenerative business practices? Which brings us on to trends like ethical capitalism. So a lot of today's youth believe that capitalism is responsible for treating workers like commodities and the planet like a commodity, which then leads to a lot of these problems that we see. So depending on the countries, between 75 and 95% of younger generations believe that businesses should be purpose-led, they should be sustainable, however, they should also embrace ethical capitalism. So ethical capitalism is where for every $1 that you spend, you try to maximize your benefits to the environment and the community as well as your profits. When we talk about resource scarcity, we've covered that, so you'll see that quite a lot of these trends overlap, but I wanted to present sustainability to you because it is a core pillar of today's businesses. And when we look at things like sustainable procurement, if you have conversations with CEOs of companies, 97% of CEOs say that sustainability is one of their top business priorities. But when you look at your procurement teams, only 65% of chief procurement officers believe that sustainability is a priority. And then when we have a look at the number of organizations that are able to figure out which of their suppliers have a better ESG rating or a good ESG rating, only 45% of companies are actually evaluating their suppliers along sustainability and ESG criteria. So we have this big disconnect. The CEOs say sustainability is important. When we're having a look at things like Scope 1, Scope 2 emissions, for example, if we're talking about carbon, then only 45% of most of your suppliers have been vetted to see how good they are when it comes to their own ESG practices. When we have a look at political, this is not much that you can do about here, but you are subject to it. We're moving from a unipolar world to a bipolar world. So that's where today the US, whatever the US typically says, goes. Over the next 10 to really sort of 15 years, it's going to be the United States and China as the two leading global economies. And they're going to have a bit of a fight, particularly as we sort of go through this transition, which is why we're seeing trade wars and sanctions being used as a weapon of choice. When we have a look at bipolar world, increasingly we then have Europe coming up, we have India coming up. So we move from a unipolar world to a bipolar world to a multipolar world in about the next 30 to 40 years. These are all significant economic, societal and political shifts. When we have a look at things like misinformation and disinformation that we're all subjected to through the social networks typically, we also see that more democratic governments are fragile. Now, what we mean by that is because we have an increasingly polarized society, you are either a left-winger or a right-winger, and there's not much left in between. So, for example, when we have a look at bipartisan politics in the United States, you are a Republican or a Democrat. And historically, and we're seeing the same thing emerge in Europe, France, Germany, so on and so forth, even to a degree in the UK, it used to be the case that political parties would have some common ground. Nowadays, though, increasingly they don't have common ground which means that whatever the ruling party wants to do, the other opponents automatically try to kill it and veto it. So this leads to a fragile government which is generally ineffective at passing new laws and new things. We see an innovation Cold War coming as well. So this is especially where China has now invested $1.4 trillion in emerging technologies or developing emerging technologies over the next 5 years. That's compared to 300 billion euros and $300 billion in the United States. So this is also leading to a splintering of standards. So if you as a company are using 5G, artificial intelligence, different kinds of peer-to-peer energy systems or renewable systems, you are increasingly going to either adopt Chinese standards or other standards, Western standards or G7 standards, for example. And the standards wars are significant enough where you will either end up being a Chinese 5G customer or a European 5G customer. So from an IT perspective and operations perspective, this creates challenges. And then we have trade wars and sanctions, which, as I say, are increasingly a financial weapon of choice to either try to slow down countries like China so that we can try to get ahead of them again, or because different autocratic states are doing things that are unacceptable in today's world, and we're trying to punish them. When we have a look at societal trends, increasingly we have an aging population. So today, 1 in 9 people are over 60. By 2030, 1 in 8 people will be over 60. So from a dentistry perspective, this presents an opportunity. We have a growing middle class. We have more people who are concerned and who promote and who support sustainable consumption. So if we're buying products, we want to buy products from ethical companies who align with our values and who provide sustainable products, but do it in a way that isn't just greenwashing. So when we have a look at consumer behaviors, increasingly the purpose of your organization, the way that you treat others, the way that you treat the planet matters to your customers. We're also in the stage of seeing the rise of what we call value hunters, because traditionally, while I want to buy products that are sustainable from purpose-led companies, courtesy of the pandemic, courtesy of the rampant inflation that we are experiencing today, individuals all around the world, as well as governments, now have more debt load than ever before. As a consequence, there is a massive pressure on the cost of living, especially across Europe, the US, as well as Asia. And this means that while as a consumer I would like to buy the sustainable product that is generally sold at a premium price, I might end up having to go for the bargain basement option. Now, when we have a look at the impact of things like inflation, we believe that inflation, as well as a higher cost of living, will be prevalent until mid-2024. So, for example, do you now roll out different purchasing models for your products? So do you provide a cheaper line of products for the next couple of years to try to actually ease some of these cost of living pains, and so on and so forth? So all of these lead to questions. And then when we have a look at technological, we are increasingly going beyond digital. So a lot of organizations talked about going to cloud, going to digital. Increasingly, we are now merging the physical world with the digital world, which is your digital service line, e-commerce, that sort of thing, with a virtual world. So we now have 3 worlds colliding: the physical world, the digital world, so your digital channels, and virtual channels. So for example, when we actually have a look at things like augmented reality, virtual reality, Web 3.0 technologies, as well as the metaverse, do you have anyone within your organization who is responsible for virtual product development or virtual business? Because we will have a physical go-to-market, a digital go-to-market, and a virtual go-to-market. And while they come together and they merge in some respects, they all have their own distinct characteristics. We have an increasingly connected society. So today, 3.5 billion people are connected. Over the next 8-ish years, 8 billion people could be connected because we are launching 12,000 satellites into space, which connect every single part of the planet. So when you have a look at the digital channel of your business, today your maximum addressable market opportunity would be 3.5 billion people. By 2030, it could be 8 billion people who could consume your digital products and services, maybe as a subscription. General purpose technology, we'll have a brief look at those, but these are the game-changing technologies like artificial intelligence, blockchain, virtual reality, augmented reality, 5G, 3D printing, and so on and so forth. We have the Internet of Things, which actually is relevant basically to the dental industry. And then we have the speed of change. Now, from a technological perspective, the speed of change is perhaps one of your biggest business challenges. Because just as you are trying to move to the cloud and digitize your business, now we're bringing in virtual products. However, we're then asking, are you using artificial intelligence and robotic process automation? Are you using robotics? What do you think about Internet of Things and 5G? What are you doing there? When we start having a look at some of the other technologies, additive manufacturing, Industry 4.0, etc., 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 increasingly as technologies, powerful technologies come at us faster and faster, your time to see them, your time to figure out what they are and why you should care about them, and then the amount of time that you have to figure out what do you do with these new things, like the metaverse, which kind of suddenly appeared in most people's eyes, or Web3, or cryptocurrency. The amount of time that you have to see these technologies, understand them, and then figure out what do they mean to your future business strategy is all condensing, which then means it gets more confusing. There's more pressure. It's more likely that you're going to make mistakes, and so on and so forth, particularly when it comes to strategy and things. So when we have a look at the future, speed matters. So you need to be a flexible and agile organization that is able to almost spin on a dime. We've seen that with the pandemic. We've seen that with the Russian war in the Ukraine. We've seen that with supply chain problems, inflationary pressures, etc. How adaptable are you? When we have a look at technologies, we talk about general purpose technologies. Most people will talk to you about 5 or 10 significant technologies like AI, VR, 3D printing, and all these kinds of things. As you see on this wheel, which is in the codex that I showed you at the start, there are hundreds of technologies, and all of these can either change one industry or every industry. They can also change every single corner of society, culture, and business. This alone is a complex thing to understand. So, when we have a look at what these technologies enable, it looks like they will destroy over $50 trillion worth of value and create $210 trillion of value. Now, taking a risk as a business is actually not a risk. We're also living in business as unusual times. You should live in the day after tomorrow, basically, when it comes to figuring out what your next steps are. So this is where you can run scenarios, serial innovation, and so on and so forth. And then you should ask yourself 3 questions as a business. How many new products have you introduced over the past 18 months? How much of the company have you reinvented over the past 18 months? So these are your new growth engines, for example. And then can you prove that you can move at speed? If there's a new opportunity, can you embrace it quickly? If there is a systemic shift, a new trend emerges, can you adapt to it quickly? Because if you can't, you're increasingly going to get stuck. And that's it for the first session. So over to Andreas. We have a bit of a Q&A, and we'll do a rapid fire Q&A. So I hope you enjoyed that bit, by the way. It's a lot to take in. There you go. And I think that's it. So Andreas, should we go for the second set? Okay, so we're going to be speeding up a little bit. So, business models. When we have a look at the future of business models, there are lots and lots of different things going on. Now, we all know these. If we sort of step back what, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, all your toothbrushes were just frankly dumb. That's it. Now, if I asked you this question, I'll give you £100 if you can figure out what I drank before I started this presentation. You wouldn't be able to answer me. However, using newer technologies, you would be able to answer me. You'd also be able to push a notification to me saying, stop drinking Coca-Cola. That's it. I am aware it's not good for your teeth. So what we're going to do is I'm going to show you a technology which can make a significant difference, but I'm going to also use this technology as a way to illustrate how powerful technologies get better and cheaper over time. So let's talk LiDAR. Now, most of you will be familiar with LiDAR, particularly if you drive cars that either semi-drive themselves or in the future drive themselves all the time. Now, in 2007, a LiDAR device made by companies like Velodyne, who are the market leader, weighed 13.6 kilograms and cost $75,000. Now, you can apply the same principle that I'm going to talk to you about for almost every technology that you care about. Artificial intelligence, 3D printing, 4D printing, immersive reality, even down to things like graphics rendering, which makes a difference in the future. Now, in 2022, a LiDAR sensor is 13 grams and it costs $5. And you can pack it into a smartphone. So now what we have is a LiDAR sensor that is increasingly powerful and cheap and affordable being packed into a smartphone. In 2007, this was impossible. In 2015, this was impossible. In 2020, this was impossible. And we can do some interesting things with this. So as these sensors get smaller and cheaper, at what point do we put a LiDAR sensor, as well as other sensors, into a toothbrush? And why do you care anyway? Now, if we have a look at Oral-B, my family all use Oral-B toothbrushes. At the moment, Oral-B basically has got a variety of different sensors like gyroscopes, accelerometers, and everything else in their toothbrushes to figure out, are you brushing the top of your teeth, the bottom of your teeth, the sides of your teeth, how long are you spending brushing, what's the pressure that you're applying, and so on and so forth. If we put a LiDAR sensor into an Oral-B toothbrush, suddenly we can turn your imagery from a 2D map to a 3D map of the inside of your mouth. Now, just as we see with a lot of the implant models, that dentists take, what could you do with a millimeter accurate 3D render of somebody's mouth? Well, firstly, you could analyze their mouth in real time. So, for example, you could see the very early formation of cavities, and over time you could see those cavities are getting larger, which then means you can create an intervention and say, by the way, there's a cavity at the back on one of your molars. It's getting bigger, so you either should see a dentist or you should stop drinking Coca-Cola, Matt. So, in addition to that, if we have a LiDAR sensor, and there's other ways to do this, but I'm using LiDAR as an example because it's a decent example. When I'm brushing my teeth, you might know that my teeth are crooked now. Now, as Straumann, if I asked you how crooked are my teeth now, you wouldn't know. But using these new technologies, not only would you know, you'd know automatically. And you could send me a push notification saying, hi Matt, we know that you are always on stage. Wouldn't you like nice teeth? And we've noticed your teeth are crooked. So what about some Invisaligners? And then you can have these 3D printed, automatically shipped in the post using an autonomous company. So increasingly, we have sensors for everything. Now, we have something called an optical biosensor. It's a kind of RNA sensor. So imagine this. If I was brushing my teeth using an optical biosensor, you could tell whether or not I have pathogens like COVID-19 in my mouth. This is possible today. None of this is science fiction. You could tell me basically the genetic makeup of my oral cells for cancer. You could also tell what the fauna is in my mouth. So you could also tell what the gases I have in my mouth. So for example, you could, from different sensors in the toothbrush, figure out whether or not I'm increasingly diabetic, and you could make an intervention. So what happens when you pack more and more sensors into a toothbrush? You can analyze everything. You can analyze the foods that I'm eating and the residues that they leave behind, plaques, so on and so forth. You could figure out that I have a high sugar diet. You could push me an advert for a Straumann food subscription, where all the foods have been certified by dentists to be teeth friendly. And that could be $30 a month. In addition to that, while I'm taking up that subscription, you could sell me a dental insurance plan, and you know the exact state of my teeth. Just like smartwatches, they know whether I'm running around or not. Increasingly, there are a lot of new dental technologies that will tell you how well I look after my teeth. So am I a high-risk insurance customer or a low-risk insurance customer? This is increasingly a data capture system. And then, if these toothbrushes, which are sensor packed, identify that something is not quite right in your mouth, maybe I've got a cavity forming, you can automatically push me to a teledentist. Now, also consider this. I know that you partner with Oral-B, but if Oral-B create increasingly smart toothbrushes that have lots of sensors in them, at what point does Oral-B go, we know a lot more about your mouth than Straumann and your dentist. So why don't we have an Oral-B subscription? Oh, and by the way, we noticed a cavity's forming. Would you like to be connected to an Oral-B certified dentist? Just as we see in telehealth, telepsychiatrists, teledentistry is an increasingly capable trend because of a lot of these new technologies. Now, Oral-B could disintermediate dentists with this play. Almost. There are areas basically they would struggle, to be fair. But is this an opportunity for you? Do you have a point of view on it? Now, we also have direct to consumer. So increasingly with new manufacturing technologies, new logistical channels, and so on and so forth, are there products where you can go straight to the consumer and increasingly disintermediate the middlemen? And you might already be doing this. But D2C is a significant rising trend. It's grown by about 80% over the past year. When we look at multi-sided platforms, the more data that you have about me and my mouth, my eating habits, my lifestyle, the more things you can sell me. So for example, you can sell me dental products, but you could also sell me food as a subscription, dental insurance as a subscription. You could sell me confidence as a subscription, which is something I sort of talked with Andreas and Sandra about the other week, and so on and so forth. Now, this kind of then leads us into this. What is your purpose? Because if your purpose as a company is to help people have better teeth, then you make the best dental products you can, and you optimize your operations. But if your business purpose is to give people confidence, that's a fundamentally different kind of market with a much bigger addressable market opportunity. It takes us into things like lifestyle, health and wellness, and so on and so forth. But if you're a digital business in the core, you can move from one market to another with ease to create a multi-sided platform. And when I speak to the tech giants, they just say, we're in every industry. When you speak to retailers, they go, well, we're just in the retail industry. Banks, we're in the financial services industry. The more data that you capture, the better positioned you are to move into other markets at speed, especially if you have digital ops. Increasingly, we have algorithmic organizations. So algorithmic organizations are where artificial intelligence is hiring people, firing people. We've got AI boards, AI managers managing people, increasingly at companies like Amazon and Uber who keep getting sued for it. But we also have the rise of fully autonomous companies over in Hong Kong and Wall Street, where artificial intelligence and different technologies like blockchain, robotic process automation, we have companies that are literally running themselves, scaling themselves, and operating. So for example, if you run a highly transactional business, do you actually need some people basically in those areas? Amazon is increasingly becoming a fully autonomous company. And while this might not be right for you, and there are lots of conversations about this, I want to show this to you to show you that these things are possible, and these things are here so you can get a point of view on them. Good, bad, other. Do now, do later, do never. Now, when we have a look at the future of work, again, everything is changing. Increasingly, we can work from anywhere. I'm working from here. You're working from there. Now, we typically say to people they should have 2 days out of the office and 3 days inside the office. However, if you offer flexible working, and you let people work from the middle of the ocean because we've got satellite-based communications now, if your staff are coming into the office at different times, that can affect your company culture, which then means that you have the issue of, do you offer flexible working, which has a negative impact on your company culture, or do you tell people they need to be in the office Monday and Tuesday, which then means that you're not offering flexible working? So we kind of have this conundrum when we talk about working from anywhere. Now, you can also work anywhere. So, for example, when I was writing one of the codexes, the Trends Codex, at the start, I just thought I'd work in virtual reality. Now, mainly because I'm a futurist and I wanted to see whether it was interesting or not. It was fairly interesting writing a codex in outer space, which is sort of where my virtual office happened to be. It was interesting. So have you experienced virtual reality for yourselves? If not, I'd actually suggest you do. However, when we actually have a look at the ability of surgeons and people in the dental profession to be able to work from anywhere, maybe we could have a dentist working from home while operating on a patient that's thousands of miles away. We have precedent in the healthcare space.
We had a young woman with an acute heart attack. The total transfer time to get her to our hospital was 3 hours. There's a feeling of helplessness as a physician that you know what the treatment is to limit their chance of death, but you can't get to them.
Our hypothesis is that if we implement remote robotics in its full capacity, we will change the lives for hundreds of thousands of patients in the US and millions around the world.
Using technologies like 5G networks and robotic systems to provide cardiac care at a distance and be able to do telestenting has the potential to change the landscape of medicine. 5G technology really opens up the possibility to do these over longer distances with minimal delays in signal and transmitting greater amounts of data.
Being able to reach a patient hundreds of miles away to deliver the care they need when they need it is one of the most disruptive things happening in the medical industry.
So dentistry as a service. Why couldn't you have a skyscraper or a building near to where you are today? You have teledentists working there, operating on people or providing services over 5G networks. They could be based there and your clients could be based anywhere. Now in China, for example, they have a shortage of dentists. So could you actually provide teledentistry services? Sort of teleoperations dentistry to people in China while your experts are in Europe. However, your customers are elsewhere. This is what new technology lets us talk about. And increasingly, when we talk about virtual reality, today we have these massive headsets and these big controllers, but those controllers are going away and they're turning into what we call EMG rings that sense your muscle movements and know what you're doing. But we're also on the verge of having virtual reality glasses. So if you wanted to pop into a virtual reality dentist's office, for whatever reason, you put on some sunglasses, you take them off, you're in and out. So this is where the convenience of technology matters. We can also work with anyone. Now, when we have a look at this, we digitize human presence.
Connection is a spark that gives our lives meaning.
So people can be next to us.
It drives us to seek out others who feel the same way.
Then improves culture.
Okay, why don't you input the data and we'll take a look together. Hey Mari, what you got for me?
To find those who share our views, yet offer different perspectives.
Look over here.
Challenge us with new ways of seeing.
That I think we should.
Deepen our understanding. and enrich our lives.
最后一笔的时候，往前
Great things happen when we commit to something bigger than ourselves.
Let's take a closer look at it.
Place this here. Let's see how we go from there, okay?
This sense of collaboration and the feelings of connection it brings excites us.
Hey, just in time. I'm gonna move it slightly, okay?
It's yours, take it.
We have 2 planes right now on the same trajectory.
As we put people first, technology fades into the background and feels like anything but.
Aisha, what do you think?
I think if we had 330, maintaining 2800, we'll be clear for approach.
Excellent.
This changes the way we see the world, and in turn, changes the world we see.
These numbers are looking great, actually.
There's promise in the possibilities, and what we see and create next will stretch the imagination.
Good morning, Sarah.
Morning.
Slowly coming towards the thumb.
A world without boundaries.
Good job. A lot better than yesterday.
Yeah.
Excellent. Slowly bring
A
the
world
arm
where
down.
technology enhances, not limits, humanity. With people front, center, and in the spotlight. The future is here. And here can be anywhere. Introducing Microsoft Mesh.
So this is where we digitize human physical presence. Those are the key words there. So for example, what would it be like if you were wearing HoloLens? Bearing in mind these gadgets get smaller, cheaper, more invisible, and I was right there in the room with you. Now, if I can work from anywhere, I can be working from here, but still be in the room with you there. On the one hand, that improves company culture with the work from anywhere trend. But in addition to that, it fundamentally changes how we collaborate with one another. It changes empathy and all kinds of different things. So we can also work with anything. So when we have a look at the future of work, these small words matter. I can work with anything. Like Anna.
Today we're all being disrupted. And I'm not just talking about by digital humans like myself with our conversational artificial intelligence, state-of-the-art high-def rendering, and neural networks for brains.
So Anna is one of my employees. She's a digital human with a neural network brain. Now, increasingly, Anna and some of her sisters, her digital sisters, are fulfilling a variety of front of house roles. So this is Cora. Cora works for NatWest. She has other versions of her that work for Daimler in customer service, where, for example, if I have a question about anything that's dentistry related, I could ask her. We've got Will in New Zealand, a digital human that's just taught 250,000 children about renewable energy. But in Cora's case, she's fielding inquiries about accounts, loans, payments, mortgages, and travel. So, for example, when you have a look at your front-end digitized operations, particularly when we have a look at digital channels, are you looking at digital influencers, digital humans, digital customer service agents? Because these can extend human presence at digital scale and let you do new things in new ways. In the future, she could be imbued with the experience of dentists. We have, in the UK, we have digital humans in the 111 service for the NHS that actually handle basic healthcare questions as well as try to diagnose basic healthcare problems. So these technologies will get much more mature over the next 10 years. The World Health Organization is also using Cora to help try to get people to stop smoking. We also have something called the Centaur principle. So we talk about automation and automated. We talk about automating people, but what happens basically when we bring people and technology like artificial intelligence together? We already have two brains. We've got the brain up here, but we've also got the brain in our smartphones. If you have a look at the smartphone, for example, Google is on your smartphone, more likely than not. The only thing that Google did was help decentralize and democratize access to information. So think about the power that Google has put in your hand, because if I asked you what the melting point of a particular enamel was today, you could find out within 5 seconds. So technology is already augmenting you in your daily life, even if you don't necessarily recognize it. Now, what happens when we have conversational artificial intelligence? What happens when we can talk to our machines and they can reply back intelligently, like the conversations you and I could have? Well, we have things like Watson.
Hey, Watson.
Talk.
I have a question for you.
Sure.
How are you different than artificial intelligence?
I share some elements with artificial intelligence, but there are key differences.
Like what?
I'm working to help people think better and make more informed decisions. Cognitive computing is about augmenting human intelligence, not replacing it.
So you're not trying to think for me?
No.
What's my favorite color?
I have no idea.
Favorite food?
Nope.
Do I prefer cats or dogs?
Cats?
Wrong. Neither. Trick question, Watson.
So, an application of this kind of technology is when you actually have a look at the amount of dentistry-related research papers that are coming through. It's increasing at a staggering rate. So how does a dentist on the front line keep up with all of the oral care as well as oral cancer research? Inevitably, they can't because they don't have enough time in the day. But artificial intelligence increasingly can help summarize a lot of that research and say, today we had 5,000 new dental papers emerge on Arvix or wherever they happen to emerge, and these are the top 5 things that you should know about. So when we start augmenting people with artificial intelligence and connecting people with artificial intelligence, which is really good at analyzing huge volumes of data, suddenly interesting things happen. In addition to that, we now have artificial intelligences that are coaching people. So in the US, we have insurance companies where artificial intelligence is teaching the customer call center agents empathy. They're teaching them to listen better. So these AIs are listening to the tone of people's voices as they're calling in, and they're saying to the call agent, this person seems agitated. Speak slower. Speak more deliberately. Use some pauses. We're also seeing artificial intelligence coaching esports gamers new strategies. And that's going very well. We're also seeing artificial intelligence being used as a trainer. Now, there was an interesting one here. Recently, we had an artificial intelligence that taught students neurosurgery. So we aren't messing around. This is neurosurgery. And what they found, and this is in the US, was the AI managed to teach people about neurosurgery, and the people that were trained via the AI retained the information 45% better than the people who'd actually gone to the human experts to learn about neurosurgery. So AI coaches and trainers. And so that's it for the second session. So I hope you enjoyed that. Again, there's a lot of things changing. I tend to say the only thing that's changing is everything. Yep. Okay. So let's talk about the future of dentistry. So we already know that we can 3D print teeth. This is no secret to you. It's no secret to me or millions of other people. However, we can also 3D print products, and you can apply this to teeth. We can 3D print teeth that have electronics and sensors built into them. We've actually already done this with hearts, where we 3D printed human hearts that have electronics in the heart. Now, the advantage of this is if you 3D print a tooth that has sensors within it, as I said earlier, you can detect the gases in someone's mouth, you can tell what they're eating. We have a privacy issue there, but you can tell what they're eating. You can tell whether or not they're getting cancers and all that kind of stuff. So we have the technology today at a very basic level, but these accelerate out, to 3D print teeth and other products that have sensors embedded within them, which then helps the customer, then helps you as well. When we have a look at artificial intelligence, increasingly we're using artificial intelligence basically to analyze radiological imagery, which helps give us a leg up basically when we talk about periodontal disease and tooth decay. We also have predictive healthcare, but also predictive dentistry, because the more information that you have from an Oral-B toothbrush, the more information an artificial intelligence has to analyze patterns. So whether it's the progress of cavities, for example, in somebody's mouth and so on and so forth. And again, if we have a look at things like gas sensors within a toothbrush, if I know that you are always consuming sugary beverages, then increasingly artificial intelligence can predict that if you keep doing that, it's not rocket science, but if you keep doing that, you're going to end up with dental issues. So when we have a look at the healthcare space, we have quantified healthcare and we have predictive healthcare. So we can do the same with dentistry because we have new ways to put new sensors and other things into products. When we have a look at augmented reality, we can use augmented reality for surgeries and pre-surgical preparation. And in fact, there's a lot more sort of coming in that AR space. When we have a look at things like bioactive materials, so we have tissue regeneration. Now, when we actually have a look at things like tissue regeneration, increasingly we can use biomineralization to fill the pores in people's teeth. We can also use that to get rid of dental bacteria. So when we have a look at bioactive materials, the market for bioactive materials is increasing exponentially at the moment. And again, because we have new ways to design new products, mainly using artificial intelligence, we can now crunch bioactive materials faster than ever before. So if we want to understand which compounds we should use for our new bioactive material, then we can increasingly do that in minutes as opposed to years that it would have taken us. We've got CRISPR Aerosols. Now, when we have a look at CRISPR Aerosols, this is where we have already, in other areas of healthcare, used mRNA as a delivery mechanism for a CRISPR gene editing tool that is able to be put into an aerosol form that we can put into a nebulizer. People then inhale that aerosol. And in the case of Parkinson's disease and cystic fibrosis, these aerosols go in, clip out the bad genes, clip in the good genes, and cure it. Now, when we have a look at things like cancer, we've already seen CRISPR technology being used to create cancer vaccines that in some cases are 100% effective. So we can also increasingly use these aerosols, although the regulators will have kittens, as we sort of discussed, to defeat the bacteria that produce plaque. So these are very weird technologies, but these technologies are already here. As I say, the regulators are having kittens over that one. When we have a look at our ability to create nanomachines and nanobots, increasingly we can create biological nanobots and nanomachines, but also we can make them out of enzymes and sort of all sorts of different compounds like silicon and so forth. So recently we saw the development of nanobots that are able to go into people's teeth. They go into the pulp, and then because they're magnetic, you can then target basically those nanoparticles and nanomachines with heat to kill any bacteria that's in the person's root canal. So again, as we discussed earlier, the regulators are going to have kittens. But these are kind of science fiction-like technologies that are already here. So this is where we use nanobots to kill the bacteria within the pulp of a tooth. We have oral cameras. So in the US, we recently 3D printed a new type of camera, and it's the size of a full stop. Literally, put a full stop on a page, it's that size. And yet it has the vision acuity of an American eagle. So when we start combining 3D printing with cameras and optics, we can create and have created new camera systems that have some terrific medical advantages. They're also hyperspectral, which means we can actually see different wavelengths of the electromagnetic spectrum. We have regenerative teeth, courtesy of the University of Nottingham, and using a sort of bioactive material again that had stem cells. We can also use metamaterials with stem cells. Rather than putting in a traditional amalgam, we can put in these new biomaterials and put the new biomaterial into people's mouths. The stem cells then start fusing basically with the pulp in the tooth. And in the University of Nottingham's case, they managed to regrow people's teeth. And these are people who had cavities and all those sorts of things. Now, in this particular case, again, the regulators will have kittens. However, from an insurance perspective, what happens when you no longer put a traditional sealant or amalgam into someone's mouth as a filling? What happens when someone regrows their natural tooth? We know that fillings crack after about 10 years. So if you offer dental insurance and you use this kind of technology, do you then just make a lot more money because the people don't have to come back to the dentist to keep getting the fillings that they've had that keep breaking repaired? So these enable new business opportunities. Robot dentists. Now, this is the one I was alluding to earlier, that again, the regulators will have kittens about. In China, they have a massive shortage of dentists, like a huge shortage of dentists. Now, this robot is about 1.5 years old, but it is a fully autonomous robot dentist, and it implanted 2 teeth in a lady with greater precision than the expert dentists who are watching over it. So what happens when we start fielding fully autonomous robot dentists that need no human involvement and no human intervention? Bearing in mind that that technology is new, however, these technologies get better and cheaper over time. So that will accelerate out. When we have a look at teledentistry, increasingly we talk about telehealth, telepsychiatry. Now, we know that teledentistry business models are already emerging, but if we start taking the LiDAR in our smartphones and we start combining artificial intelligence with the different sensors in our smartphones, all of a sudden, when you have a look at the next generation of smartphones and Qualcomm chips, they will be able to analyze the gases in your breath. So from a teledentistry perspective, not only can we use smartphones to see in your mouth, we can use them to map your mouth, but also we can use them to sense the different gases as you breathe out, which gives you valuable information again about people's diets and eating habits, but also about their oral bacteria and fauna and all sorts of other things as well. So when we have a look at using when we have a look at using breath as what we call an oral biomarker, the amount of data that you can suck out of that is immense. And if you have a teledentistry platform, all of a sudden you have more information that you can shake a stick at. Which then also means that we can use these technologies to increasingly decentralize dentistry. Certainly the basic dentistry and even the intermediary dentistry. Now, if we have a look, for example, at a lot of the emerging markets, we know that the availability of qualified dentists is a problem. And it's going to be a bigger problem as we see more people coming through, as we see population growth and an aging population. These technologies can help assuage some of the problems that we see providing frontline dental services to people who don't necessarily have any form of access to dentists at all. And then you wrap this up as a subscription model, and all of a sudden you have a new income stream. And then when we have a look at things like virtual reality, we've seen virtual reality being used to create what we call post-operative empathy. So, for example, if you are going in for some dental surgery, we can increasingly use particularly if it's reconstructive surgery, say for example on a child. We're already seeing in the UK how virtual reality can be used to help parents visualize the outcome of their children's operations and then visualize what their lives would actually look like. So not only are we using virtual reality for things like virtual reality training, but we're also using virtual reality to show people what they would look like post-operatively, but also to allow their family and friends to understand more about what the outcome of those procedures are actually going to be, so they can have more empathy, so they can make better informed decisions, and then they can do whatever they want to do. We've also seen virtual reality being used to reduce patient anxiety. So one of my nieces is very anxious when she goes to the dentists, as you sort of might understand. And again, particularly in the US, we're seeing the use of virtual reality to help calm patients down while they're undergoing the surgical procedures. And then again, from a teleoperations perspective, that follows on from that future of work perspective, there's all sorts of things that we can actually do in these particular environments. So when we have a look at teleoperations, if you're combining virtual reality with teleoperations, as we saw, suddenly the dentists who are maybe in New York and operating or providing a service to somebody, say, in South Africa, can have much more physical presence. And then that's it for the session. So I think we've got some more Q&As. That's it. But that is me done. So thank you very much, everyone, for listening. I hope you enjoyed the presentation. And over to you again, Andreas.